And welcome back to Elementary 72 Gaming. I am here with the leader of the Burn Jita group. He's going to actually be explaining to us exactly what's going on and why they're having this protest against the industry. Now, I'm going to be quiet through this interview, and I'm giving it over to Triumph. Triumph, it's yours.
Howdy, y'all. So, it's real simple. Many of us love this game. We've spent a lot of time. We want it to succeed. The newest insurance system is doing the antithesis of what NetEase intended it to do. They said they were implementing the system in order to get rid of the old SRP program by their own account, which accounted for 13% of all ship losses being recovered through it. However, with this new insurance system, after mass testing of over 400 ship kills in the last 4 days, we have discovered that not only is the number of ships that are magically being replaced from thin air way higher than 13%, that NetEase is actually skimming Plex off the top of this entire process, destroying it and removing it from the server and the economy as a whole. Right now we've done our math, and because they're taking this Plex out of the pool, it's actually taking a lot more than their supposed 20 ship replacements. When I did the test with the burst, it took 188 burst kills to generate a single replacement buy order ship on the market. And so essentially, this will destroy industry. It will destroy ratting outside of anything that is a storyline mission, because it's going to be able to replace rigs, modules, and ships out of thin air. It removes the free economy that makes EVE, and it also gives the opportunity for pay-to-win whales to be able to come in, swipe their credit cards, and magically make armies appear out of nowhere in their enemies' NPC stations. This is supposed to be a game of grand strategy, and instead what we're getting is the ability to magically poof armies in your enemies' stations, and then every 12 hours repeat that process. You no longer can have a strategic stronghold, and this doesn't just impact industry, miners, and ratters, it's also going to impact PvPers in the long run, because if miners and ratters leave because their efforts are being suppressed and pushed down, and making the only viable way of omegaing by actually spending real life money to Plex, then PvPers are going to have nothing to kill, and PvP for the sake of PvP isn't what EVE Online is, or EVE Echoes is about. EVE Echoes is about your impact mattering, your PvP actions changing the tide of the battle. And by removing and stripping this and taking everything to the centralized economy that NetEase controls, it's hurting us drastically, and it's going to cause long-term issues with this game. That's our stance in general.
Okay. You have anything else to say about the issue at hand?
Nope.
That's all. Okay. So that's going to be it for this part. Okay, so we're back again on my channel, and this time I'm back again one more with Triumph, and we're actually going to be discussing the system back and forth between the two. So the first thing to say is I've already given my opinion in my video for why I like the insurance system. Obviously there are some bugs and some things that need tweaking. Like as they said, they've actually tested it and they found that there's a flaw in their system. It's supposed to be 1 in every 3 losses is a ship given to that generation. So yes, I do understand that is a problem, but I think that in the long run this is going to be more interesting for the PvP flow of combat. It makes a more heavy strategy. You can't just turtle around a station and hope that the strategic point of the station gives you an advantage in combat. And you have anything to say about that?
I will say that when we talk about strategy, one of the big things in strategy, from Sun Tzu all the way to several mass generals throughout history, has been logistics win wars. EVE Online, the best battles, the biggest battles, the things that's always talked about sometimes is the logistics to get those ships into place. And being able to magically generate ships out of thin air isn't strategy, it isn't logistics, it is streamlining and dumbing down the game to the point that essentially whoever has the most money in their wallet wins.
Well, here's my point of view on that. Well, even though it can be used to ambush a person on a station, with the current mechanic of sovereignty being introduced, they can't really attack your strongholds all that well, because generally it's going to be where your citadels are. They're going to be your strong points. They can't dock at your citadels unless you give them permission to. And with that being the advantage, they're only getting a sneak path into your territory. Basically, it would be the same thing if they had to move around with Atron interceptors for 6 weeks, running up and down, filling everything in the station. It just makes the combat that much faster. It speeds up the pace of the game in terms of combat, as far as that goes on the logistics. So yes, some corps are going to have problems if they're primarily based out of a station, but if they're not primarily based out of an NPC station and based out of a citadel, it's going to be better for them in terms of combat, because they have a more defendable position. Go for it.
So, I would absolutely 100% agree with your statement if it was not for the fact that there are so many NP stations situated around 0.0 nullsec. Currently, every single major block in this game is stationed around an NPC station. Now, maybe in the future, sometime 4, 5, 3 years from now, when they actually implement correct outposts where people can put up buy and sell orders through citadels, we'll see difference. But you were talking about NetEase that has told us they were going to give a SOV in December, delayed it by a month, and it's completely watered down. You're talking about people sitting around their own citadels, but the fact of the reality of the matter is there are so many NP stations all around 0.0, and we have no timeline for when those are going to be removed. So when those NPC 0.0 stations are removed, I will be in 100% agreement with you, sir.
I actually think that this year makes the combat a little bit more fun, because you don't have that same mechanic that I currently see most corps doing. Like, if there's going to be a fight, everybody just hurdles around a gate for the primary defense. The secondary defense is on your station, and you try and stop the enemy from getting in. And once they take the gate, then they flood into your sector, they form a big bubble, and it's bubble versus bubble warfare. This way you can't form your bubbles. Everybody's jumping out of the station. It's going to be a mad fest right on the station dock, because it's going to introduce that.
You just undermined your own point, sir.
I know.
You said that
the citadels are a different story, but for the NPC station.
Okay. So you're acknowledging then that they'll just be coming out of the station. And as far as the combat being boring, where you're sitting on bubbles or you're defending your station, I absolutely agree. That's boring gameplay. Unfortunately, this is not the solution to that issue. Being able to come out of random NPC stations, if the entire point of nullsec is to own the land, to own the territory, to put in that blood, sweat, and tears, and if it's supposed to mimic that on EVE Online world, then at this point, what becomes the point of owning nullsec? You're saying you're going to see more PvP in combat, but many blocks are already talking about moving our assets back up to highsec and just doing storyline missions and amassing war wallets and doing zero combat and zero engagements until there's actually a meaning and a reason. What makes combat fun and great and EVE Echoes is not the actual combat, but the repercussions and the impact that combat has. When you destroy an enemy citadel, or when you wipe an enemy's fleet off the grid, you are actually taking something out of the game. You're causing a major impact. That's where the combat is actually meaningful. If you want fun, engaging PvP combat, go do small frigate roams in low-sec or on the fringes of nullsec. Don't destroy nullsec for the purpose of quote-unquote faster fights. Because you're not going to get more fights. What you're going to get is people leaving the game because industry has nothing to do. You're going to remove the target, because one of the most funs I've had in this game is doing small frigate roams into the enemy's territory and harassing their industry line. We go back to this. Hold on one second. My mouth is drying and I need to take a sip of water.
Go for it. No stress.
And so, by removing the need for industry by generating all these ships out of thin air, essentially, because the thing is you don't actually, those buy orders don't have to be placed. They can keep
they don't have
just
to be filled.
put.
Yeah, I know.
And so you're removing all these strategic aspects of going and trying to attack the enemy's industry line, attacking their radders, because there's not going to be industry people, there are not going to be miners, because it's not going to be profitable. I mean, the best medium shield module, shield booster in this game currently is less than 6 million ISK. A new player within 2 weeks, and that's being incredibly generous of how long it takes, can afford the very best shield module for a medium ship in literally 2 weeks, and we haven't even started to see the price impact that this is going to have on the market.
Okay, well,
where's the in-game content?
Well, here's exactly my point on that. I actually think it's going to boost industry in the long run. Obviously, if they fix up their buy order, purchase order, and you see those orders sitting on the market in the ITCs, it's going to force Nullsec Corps to take over the ITCs. It's going to make them big areas for combat, because you don't want the enemy to run a massive production line. And the moment they have the ITC, they have this massive funding coming their way, because regardless of how it flows, most ships are marked up at least 40%. I'm just saying as a minimum. So you mark up a good 40% on your profit, and that's what you're making. Obviously, I'm just saying that as a figure. I know some ships are way less. You're only making 10 million or 5 million off those ships. But that's the thing. With the ability of these ITCs holding all those orders, it makes a massive demand for industry players to have the PvP heads move that way and capture the ITCs. It's going to generate a lot of content, and if they can hold one of those ITC stations and you can hold that sector and do the production, you have a monopoly on the game, because you're going to get a ton of cash out of your enemy and yourself every time you have an engagement, and it will push you to have more engagements with your enemy to generate more IS to cover your SRP programs.
So I disagree with that for the simple fact that even in their best effort right now, like, it's bugged right now, quote unquote bugged. I don't see how it could be bugged. It has to be intentional with the Plex being skimmed off the top of the system. But the issue is currently it's destroying, I know it's for a fact destroying our Alliance's SRP program. And right now you're saying that there's going to be more demand for industrialists, even though the fact that there's going to be 2/3 less ships having to be bought. The fact that now that 1/3, or when reality it's more closer to about 12 to 15% after you do the math and see how they're skimming 36% off the top of all of these Plex cells, you'll see that it's a really silly argument to say that there's going to be more demand for industrialists when the actual ship needs from players outside of this system is going to be reduced by 2/3. There's no way that this ITC content generation is going to make up for that 2/3 loss. In addition, right now we're seeing these massive, like, for instance, Prophecy. In Jita right now is about 187 million. The estimated price is 217 million. So you're right, we have moved some Prophecies up to those ITCs to sell them. But the thing is when that estimated price adjusts back down to that Jita 187 million, then those estimated prices are going to go down to 187 million, which then means Jita prices are actually going to start suppressing for mineral prices. And it's going to be a downward spiral to the very bottom for ship cost. There's no gain for industry. There's no gain for miners. It's a race to the bottom. Math by math.
Okay, but this is as far as I see it. Right now I see the industrial market as being one of the safest markets to play. I know for the fact that your miners do have the risk of losing ships, and all of that plays into the equation. But when it comes to manufacturing, people who are just pure manufacturing industrials, they don't run any risk. They just get to sit in a station, produce a ship, and it's done. There's no moving the items, there's no moving the minerals that they purchase. They are holding a lot of content to themselves. And with them having to have to move to these ITCs or haul a whole freight load to high-sec to fill in orders, where I'm suspecting most of the orders are going to be in high-sec.
So I suspect it's going to... Correct. The way that it works, sir, is that the kills go to the closest ITC, and considering most combat kills are done in nullsec, we are seeing for a fact that if you look, there are tons of retriever orders up in nullsec ITCs that are not being filled, because at this time, industrialists don't feel the risk. We talk about content and engagement and things like that, and you're saying that right now there's no risk to industrialists. But the reality is, unless you're selling inside your alliance and inside your insurance program, you're having to transport those ships to HiSec. How many kill mails have we seen on Eve Echo's Reddit of people transporting faction ships up to HiSec getting ganked by pirates? That's content, sir. That's how pirates make their lifeblood. If you remove the need to transport goods to HiSec, you are removing pirates in low-sec. It's actually going to be in the 0-0 systems to low-sec, like, say, Doral, for instance, near on the east side.
But there's also...
So you're removing that content. You're actually making it safer for industrialists. And to say that industrialists have no risk is silly. I have 7 accounts. 5 of those are miners, 1 of them is industrialist, and then 2 are mixed PvP. And I will tell you that the risk that I've actually stopped doing industry because the prices keep plummeting, that by the time I buy my minerals and my resources and I build the ship, there could already be so much market suppression that I'm actually losing ISK after the 16.2% broker's fee plus sales tax.
Okay. So that is a viable argument, I won't deny it. But here's how I see it. With the instant sales and the purchases, if I am correct, there's no tax charged to you. It goes as an instant sale, you get the money directly to you when you fill in a buy order. Because the tax is being charged on the person who placed the buy order. So you making
the broker's fee, sir. So you're right. You will save 5. I think right now with 4 skills, I have a 5.2 broker's fee. So you're correct. I would save 5.2% on the broker's fee, but the sales tax is still there. Okay. The sales tax is paid by the seller in all instances.
Okay. So you're going to get hit with the sales tax, but you are making that extra amount of profit. When it comes to moving up between the two sectors,
it's not profit when it's going to keep getting, the value of those ships is going to keep getting lower and lower. Now you can say the minerals are also going to drive in value, and so this will still always be that margin. But the amount of work that a person now has to do, because still people have to mine those minerals, still people have to go out and get that stuff, people have to use their industry slots. You are actually driving the value of those industry slots down because you are essentially creating more than 70% of ships from thin air. You cannot compete with 30% market value to replace a ship, no matter if I'm getting that 5% broker's discount. And we have to remember that it's still, in the past, when 3 prophecies would be destroyed, that's 3 prophecies that had to be filled by industrialists. Now, it's only a single prophecy that's going to be filled by industrialists. This also hurts any industrialist that's not in those null-sec blocks that can't take over those ITCs, because you're absolutely right. My alliance is planning on taking the ITC that's 10 jumps from us. But the thing is so many of these alliances are spread so far out that we all have our own ITC hubs. It's not going to generate content because those ITCs are already so far removed.
Yeah, that is true. Now, since they were basically like dead whales in terms of their usage, they weren't really up to their potential. With the insurance system, now we have the potential for a very low market in null, which is how it is meant to be. Null is meant to be a lot cheaper than Jita as far as you're considering it. It's a high-risk area. If you're entering the high-risk area, you're generally going to get goods very, very cheap. And if you're going to the low-risk area, high-sec, you're going to get goods extremely expensive. It's the premium. So I would say that in retrospect of the two being done, they're actually trying to rebalance the market. So Jita is always going to drive prices crazy, and nullsec is always going to push prices down. And that's the way that it's meant to work. It's meant to stabilize the market. That's what the insurance system is doing right now. Even though it is definitely taking away...
Can you say it's stabilizing the insurance market when we've seen a 30% market crash in pretty much all ships and modules since the implementation of this insurance program?
Okay.
Stabilizing and a market crash are not the same thing, sir.
Alright, wait. I'm going to explain something. The market is overinflated. Everything on the market has been going crazy for months. The price of those battleships, for example, they're sitting at... can I finish?
Sure.
Okay. The price of the battleships, for example, they started off at near 5 billion and now they're sitting almost at 17 billion and 20 billion apiece because their demand went so crazy. With this current system...
Incorrect, sir. The reason why they went up so high is because NetEase decided to nerf the drop rates for debris to, I believe it was 2/5 of their original amount. So if you don't want battleships to blow up in price, then return the debris drop count to what it was pre-nerf. The issue is not that they're inflating because it's such a massive demand, although I will admit there's a huge demand for those faction battleships. The issue is that they nerf debris drop rate. So to say that the market is exploding and then using the only example in the game of items going up in value, but every single module, every single rig, every single ship
it's now coming down,
been steadily decreasing in price. Outside of those faction ships has steadily been decreasing in price over the last 3 months, to the point where I opened up with you that the best medium shield booster can be bought on the market now for $6 million. So I agree with you. Battleship and faction ships are outrageously priced, but insurance is not the fix for that. The fix is to restore the debris drop rate.
That could also definitely.
The debris are the bottleneck.
Okay, wait.
Can you acknowledge that, sir? That
it is.
Were you aware that they nerfed debris drop rates?
I do. I actually made a video about it. I complained about it a lot. I do disagree with NetEase on 90% of their decisions. I know that most of them are money grabs. They're forcing players to invest more into the game in terms of real money to pull out more investment. But I feel that this one major update in terms of insurance is actually going to depreciate the entire market. It's going to bring things down to a more manageable rate. Obviously, the faction ships are still going to be outrageous in comparison. But the modules, which were, like you're saying right now, it's $6 million for a C-type. In month 2, it was $6 million for a C-type. I remember that because I bought my first group of C-type medium shield boosters at the time. So we literally restored the game to month 2 where a lot of the changes started. So with this insurance system, things are returning to...
Our alliance was one of the first to kill a dead space. We had a dead space killed on day 4. Adaptives were like 200 mil. The C-type heat sinks were going for like 250 mil. And then after a month, you were seeing those C-type heat sinks for about 160 mil. They're now down to about 50 mil. Adaptives are down to 15 mil. Large shield boosters used to be 300 mil. They're down to 130 mil. Like, the reason I'll take your word for it that you bought medium C-types back in month 2 for $6 million, but I was not seeing that, sir.
That's the thing. Everything has a learn rate and a flow rate in the game. And what NetEase did was they've changed it up so many times that we're right now sitting in the middle of a period where we don't know where we need to go with the game. They need to slow us down a bit. They need to give us other content to look at. Because, to be honest, on the update schedule, the next major update that's creating content is in April, when the insurance system is being revamped, which is already on their roadmap before they even introduced phase 2, which tells me that this might have been a planned phase to force this type of action. They want us to generate other content for ourselves for the next month and a half, and then in April, when they finally release the next lot of patches, hopefully it will be something that will hold up for us. Obviously, they didn't expect for so many flaws to be pushed into their insurance system, and it is definitely having an impact. I do admit that they need some work on this insurance system, 1 or 2 updates, but I believe that the recurring ability of a person to get a ship back at a third of the price, provided they make sure that for every 3 a ship is generated on the market, is much more fair, because it allows players to catch right back up to where they fell from. So a player can drop down from a loss of a ship and come back up with the ship almost instantly. It means that a player can go into a dead space where they just lost a ship immediately after losing it. They don't have to lose that 300 or 400 more.
So I am the leader of a large corporation alliance block, and I'll tell you, after one of our members loses like a major ship, we've had people come back in and vex their trainers into our dead spaces so that way we can get them back on their feet. You should not... EVE Online has always been about player-controlled, player economy, like it being the will of the players. And so that's that element of you helping your players back up. In terms of the cost of ships, you also have to remember that T9 is only like 9 days away for a lot of our players.
Actually, 6 days away for the frontliners, 7 days away for the second line group, and then 9 days for the majority of the forerunners, all of those who bought the chips in the start.
And so at tier 9, we're getting the Procure, which gives 26% or 36%, I forget, I haven't looked at the math in a couple days, more minerals, which means more minerals drives down the price to produce ships. So we're already about to see in 9 or 10 days ship prices drop further. Now I understand that there's going to be battleships which are going to consume more PI and more minerals, etc., etc., etc. But what percentage of our players are actually going to be T9, and what percent of our forerunners that are going into T9 don't already have faction battleships? I myself have 2. The only thing I'm looking forward to in T9 is the humpback, and that's just because I'm a silly man-child that laughs at when they say hump. Like, I have nothing to look forward to at T9 to build. And so we're already about to see prices on ships go down in less than a week and a half just due to the nature of their tier progression system. We don't need cheaper items at this point. Now, I agree, the insurance is nice, but EVE Online already had a system in place that worked well. And so we have to realize that NetEase originally said that this was going to, that we have to acknowledge these facts. Players were upset by the SRP program, that they felt it was generating too many free ships into the system. By NetEase's own numbers, in their December dev blog note, it was 13% of ships being destroyed were being placed from thin air. Now we're looking at 70%, or 1 in 3, 66.666 rounding, of course, percent. And so 66.6 divided by 13 is what? Like 4.5 times more. And so if the players were upset about 13% of ships being generated from thin air, and NetEase coming out and saying we are doing this for the industrialists, so that way they feel like they're not being like taken advantage of or being removed from this equation, and then to quadruple down on the free ship generation, it goes against what like the players are complaining about in this entire insurance program. And you're right, they haven't added a lot of new content at all. Like, there's been nothing really new since November. It's all just been like minor tweaks or updates. Saw's a joke. It has like zero to little benefit. And so we're essentially getting to the situation where they spent this long and these resources. They said they pushed pretty much all of their other plans aside to fix this insurance program, when they could have just copied their big brother EVE Online, had it implemented in like 3 weeks, and been able to provide us new content. The fact is NetEase is doubling down on a bad system, and no matter what way they tweak this, they can either, instead of it being 1 in 3, they just instantly put up all buy orders, and now we're having a massive ISFOSKit, or we're going to have the deflation of all rigs, all assets, all values. Do I believe that some rigs need to be cheaper? Do I believe that some ships need to be cheaper? Absolutely. But I believe the way we should have gone about that is entirely different. For instance, all those rigs that drop that have like no purpose, no meaning, they could have done like a lottery type system where you go to an NPC, you pay ISK, you give them so many different rig blueprints, and then you can roll for like ones that you actually value and care about, which would have been an ISK sync into the system. It would have allowed the rig prices to stabilize and go down, so you don't have those CCC controllers for 900 million, or the fact that all these are constricted to different regions. I agree with you, there are a lot of issues in the game that need to be fixed. I just think that this is the worst possible way they could have gone about implementing change.
Okay, now another thing on the feedback system, I don't know if you've gone through the Google Play comments, and the bad comments, those who basically rated the game very low, and you know that they've lost a severe amount from their starting audience. Most of them are, it's too high risk with no guarantee of recovery. There's too much of a risk in the game, and most players were along that route, because obviously, even though this is based off EVE Online, it is a mobile game. And since it's mobile, players want that little bit extra assurance, that little bit extra safety in their gameplay. So that is one of the reasons why they brought the system. They may be trying to pull in another audience to the game in the next few weeks, and this might be their big ploy. give people a safety system and see if they can get back some of their old audience, which is quite a big possibility because most of those who left the game were PvE and PvP players because they were too frustrated with the losses. And with everything being cheaper and the insurance system, it's going to give them a reason to come back in.
Not when we're protesting and every magazine is picking up how poorly they're doing. I understand that this is a mobile game and mobile games are different. Like I'm a very big fan of the autopilot warping to 0 versus 15K. In terms of ship losses, I completely understand like that aspect. And I'm not saying that there are not issues. For instance, what they could have done is when you lost your ship, you could replace it, but it's going to be an inferior hull that only does that has 70% of the total shield, armor, and hull, which doesn't actually necessarily impact you with routing except slow you down from having to warp in and out. But that is a way, there are many ways they could have gone about fixing this to please those casual players without having to destroy the economy. Because tell me this, if you're a player trying to min-max, which a lot of players are, or you're trying to be able to get that advantage and edge, if right now in nullsec the profit comes from Inquiz and Dead Spaces, if
Correct.
those all drop in value...
Sorry, one moment. Can you hear me?
...in prices...
Sorry.
Go to...
The signal cut off a little bit while you were talking for about the last minute. Not minute, half a minute. Sorry about that.
Okay, so the issue is that there are a lot of issues. There are ways we can go about making it more forgiving for players, and one of those ways is just following EVE Online's insurance program. EVE Online insurance program, which gives you just ISK from the system, and yes, it's an ISK faucet. I acknowledge that completely, and that's been a major issue in EVE Online. But we've already had ISK faucets from month one. People were doing those T10 storyline missions that were generating 250 million. And speaking of storylines, if now of all of the value in nullsec from those Inquisitors and Dead Spaces are going to drop dramatically because their demand is cut by 2/3, then really that only leaves going to the high sec, although technically it's low sec, but there's no difference in this game between high sec and low sec when you can warp to a safe anom no one else can go to, is people are just going to be running those 250 million storyline missions over and over and over again because they're the most profitable option. So it's going to stymie nullsec. I completely agree. I understand the perspective. I feel the pain of those players that they lose a ship and now they feel like they've been knocked back so far. I think that's why they tried to do the tier system initially, because I remember a lot of players getting into EVE Online would want to jump into a battleship on day one and then get it blown up because they don't have the skills. But to say that this was the solution, it's saying right now we have an issue with our hospital being on fire, so the way we're going to solve it is to drop a meteor on it to crush out all the fire, when you could just use a water hose to put out the fire. The EVE Online already had a decent enough insurance program that they could have implemented with little time, that then they could have gone back and focused on adding those new features and updates. And so maybe that April update would have actually been a mid-January update, and we would all be much happier players. I'm not against those. I feel for them. We've had players lose stuff, and I've donated over 10 billion ISK to my members to get them back on their feet. I've tossed $2,000 into this game. Originally, I'm one of those whales. I'm one of the people, actually, at 2K, I'm probably more of a dolphin than a whale, but semantics.
Yeah.
So, I get that. I want that to be, I want these players to come back. I want it to be engaged. I want those numbers that we had on day one. But to say that this insurance program is going to fix that, it might, but it's causing so much harm where the harm outweighs the good. I'm with you. I want our players to be able to play and not fear undocking. And there was a solution for that EVE Online has had for over 10 years. And if NetEase can't take good directions from their big brother to find solutions, and they want to make and reinvent these complicated wills, because let's be honest, this insurance program, especially now that they're skimming flex off the top, It's just a massive way to try and push to Plex, where people, when they lose their ship, instead of going back into the game and grinding back the ISK or getting help from their allies and their corporations, are now just going to swipe their credit card and they're going to purchase Forum and they're just going to reimburse.
That is exactly what's going to happen. And okay, I know that it sounds very bad from the perspective of the current player base, but from what we've seen in stats, we're only about 60,000 at maximum players on the game right now in the active community, from an original community of almost 2 million players. So if you count that against each other, they're trying to reverse where they lost 1.9 million people. And
now that 2 million player base is not fair. Any brand new game is going to see a massive surge in players and then a dwindling and drop. So you said there's currently about 66,000 players, you said?
Yeah, about 68,000 players.
68,000? I'm doing some math real quick. And let's say, what estimate do you want to say of those are actually Omega players?
Omega players are approximately 90% of the game. From standard, not duo.
So just Omega, not Omega Duo.
Not Omega Duo.
90%, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so 0.9. So that's 61,200 players. $306,000 a month, which is not enough to host servers. I fully acknowledge that. I'm not sure what the salaries in China are. They definitely, that's not enough to sustain this game economy. However, there's several options that they could have done to increase revenue. They tried to make money through skins, but not like they do in League of Legends. And I actually have an article up about this on my LinkedIn Professional discussing the Monocle Gate situation. But my point being is, for one, they could have introduced skill injectors. We've already accepted that as EVE Online players. That would have allowed players to get back on. They could have done other shady shit where, how we now have those high-sec warp buffs that you go about 100% faster, 50% faster.
Correct.
There are other avenues of revenue, but the thing is actually, no, what's going to happen is, you're right, if these changes go into place, we're going to see a flood of casual people just swiping their credit card.
Dumping in.
EVE Echoes is not going to be an EVE game anymore. It's not going to have the heart, the spirit, or the soul, but they'll get maybe 100,000 casual players at the cost of this dedicated 61K player base. But I will say that a lot of the the only news that you're seeing now about EVE Echoes is when we do those big giant player battles like we did when we fought GenFed Station 2 weeks ago. That's the type of stuff that gets put out to the news. But if it's now just shit blows up, shit dies, and there's no value, there's no meaning, the combat's not really that engaging. I think that NetEase has failed. I think they've been kind of incompetent on their development, on their timeline releases, on the things that they have focused on. I mean, it's 6 months into the game, and the balance between shield and armor is still there. I think NetEase forced himself into a no-lose situation, and I think, sir, you've helped me realize that EVE Echoes is dead.
It's been dead for a while.
This is a last attempt cash grab, and that makes me sad.
You see, the big problem was they interfered with the majority of the player base in the start of the game because they tried to bring balance to the hardcore players. They believed the hardcore players would sustain them. Then they took a massive loss. They lost a couple 100,000 players, and they thought it wasn't too bad. So then they tried to go further towards the hardcore module so that they had players buying skins.
May I ask you a question? What changed? Did they lose 100K? Is it that the bubbles in November?
And prior to that, when they announced the first update to missiles, the missile downgrade, 60% of the game.
So you mean where everyone was just flying one cookie cutter ship, and everyone was just so. I'm sorry, but that's not them catering to the hardcore players. That's them trying to balance out their game to make all options viable.
All right, now
I
when
don't
they
see
did
how
it,
that's catering to the hardcore.
when they did it, they interfered with the majority of their player base. It's not something wise to do for a company who's trying to start up a game. And when you interfere with such a large base, players are going to get upset because they were already in the lead seat. They had gotten used to it. They dedicated their SP to it. There wasn't any SP reset at the time. And all of a sudden...
Great point. Yes, thank you, sir. I agree with you. There should have been an SP reset. They introduced, it's almost like, thank you so much, it's almost like they introduced a cash grab where they made a major change to the game, introduced an option where people could then reset their SP, but did not then give, in fact, a lot of players are saying, hey, since you guys are changing this and you're nerfing all this stuff, are you going to give us an SP reset? And the devs at the time, because I remember that exact dev QA, were like, unfortunately, we can't do that at the time. We're looking into it about future possibilities. So I agree. They screwed with their player base, but that wasn't them catering to the hardcore thing. That was NetEase making another poor choice.
And then they made a second poor choice in the form of the bubbles. It became too dangerous to travel, and players just started shrinking away. I remember I was in Crimson Now Kingdom at the time, and we were having a lot of problems. We were in the middle of the war with OP4S at the time, and all of a sudden you just see the game is just like squashing away. Players just fell away instantly. A lot of the updates are premature.
Absolutely. You're so right. I agree with you. You're 100%. In fact, they released bubbles before they released interceptors. And the solution to that at the time would have been to make a base interceptor at like T4, T5 that had maybe like 1/2 or 1/4 the cargo space as the other interceptors, so players still had some viability. Like, I'm agreeing with you, they keep making poor choices. I think where we disagree are what the solutions. Well, actually, we agreed on the SP reset. So, no, I agree with you. They released bubble, like, it feels like NetEase doesn't know what they're doing. They don't understand what makes the game the game. It's not necessarily catering to hard players. And you know what? I'm okay. Like, I agree with the bubbles in a mobile game, not necessary. What they could have done, and a better solution, would have been to release SOV and bubbles at the same time and provided an advantage where in territory and SOV you control, you can deploy bubbles. And so that way, for people going through like NPC nullsec, which is a lot of the adjacent things that burst out into different regions like Curse, they could have made it where like, okay, we're not harming players or restricting their thing to do. We're making our nullsec players happy by giving them controlling SOV a reason to control SOV. So no, I agree with you absolutely. They've made several poor choices that have hindered their player base, and now, in my opinion, it appears that they are scrambling to make money, and this is a last-ditch cash grab.
Yeah. From what we're basically seeing from their devs, they're basically going along the route to give us Dreads by August, which is a 1 year in, and you're having a capital ship. As far as I'm concerned, that's a bit too early. I don't think we should have capital ships at the end of the first year. It should be a 1.5 year process. I think Wormhole should have only come in at the end of a year. But with the way things are going,
had faction battleships this early.
Yeah, it was way too early. They did it as a cash grab again. They're trying to generate more money in the game. It did help them severely in the start, but it died out very quickly afterwards, and obviously it's punishment to them when they can't generate more money out of the game. Obviously the markets, we don't want it to go live, because if it goes live, it's going to plummet the industrial value as well. Hopefully they don't go through with those updates. It is in the plans from what I heard, and I'm just hoping that we stay as we are in the game a little bit, and you know, they just need to tweak one or two things around this insurance system. I do agree that it does have some negative repercussions, but it could have a bigger positive to the game. It might get them their community and might force them to ease up on the money grabs. And the less money grabs they have to push in, the better it will be for us as it goes on, because this year might become a staple and industrial pilots might have to focus on a secondary objective. There is still skill reset. They can always jump up to reprocessing pilots, and even with this insurance system, I believe it's possible that industry can have a massive flow in terms of getting new how do I say it, in terms of getting new ships made, because when people aren't losing their ships, they're going to try and fill up their collection of ships. If somebody is like me and they want every Caldari ship, they might just go through and buy every Condor, every destroyer. Basically, you get what I'm saying, just buy up everything they can the moment they have the ISK to do it. Do you agree on that point?
I will agree that when people are not spending as much ISK, they throw their ISK into other things. I have several players. I will fully admit that I trend towards the hardcore. Like I told you earlier, I have about 7 accounts. The thing is those niche that want to complete their entire collection, a lot of people just want the very best. Now, this is kind of segue, and so my issue is the insurance system as it is could have been fine. All they would have had to do is made one additional change that they released at the same time. And I've been thinking about this, and my solution is a system called reinforcing hulls. So we are going to see a decrease in the number of hulls needed and the number of like modules, et cetera, needed. What they could have done is made it where, like, let's say you have a prophecy, right? You can get a reinforcement item that's made by industrialists. That reinforcement item costs the exact same mineral and PI requirements and ISK requirements to make as that prophecy, but then you attach it to that prophecy and it gives it a 10% shield hull armor bonus and then a 5% damage bonus. We're not going to mess with speed or range or anything like that because that's a lot of balance and tweaks, et cetera, et cetera. It's much easier to do numbers. And then you could have done that up to 5 times. So then that would have created a reason for people to generate. But then when your ship would blow up, instead of getting that reinforced times 5 hull, you would just get your base hull back. So that way people who want to just have like, okay, I want to have a prophecy, I want to get back into it, they would have had that cheaper 30% discount. But then you would have added the players that are always going to try and be min-maxing who are like, oh no, I lost my 5 reinforced prophecy. Now I need to go buy essentially what amounts to 4 more prophecies to re-get it back up. So if in another world, in another system where there was more industry, there was more demand, where there was more items for industrial players to make, I could see this insurance not being an issue, easy to work around, being a great solution. The issue though is they're implementing one half of a solution before they have the other half that negates the negative effects. And we've seen this time and time again. We saw this, like you said, with the Caldari missile changes. We saw this with the bubbles. We saw this with SOV. They don't know how to execute on solutions. So if tomorrow, they implemented that reinforcement system, which if you think about it, doesn't necessarily require a lot of code. It's just more database strings. It's just duplicating every single ship that already exists in the game and then tweaking the stats by 10%, 20%, 30%, et cetera, like that could be done code-end in a week. It would have given players something to like, oh, I'm going to spend all my resources building these reinforcement modules. The issue is NetEase keeps trying to solve solutions, but creates bigger problems to begin with. It's like if you have a mouse in your house, you get a cat, but then you can't get the cat to leave, so then you get a dog. But then you can't get the dog to leave, so then you get a lion. But then you can't get the lion to leave, so then you get a silverback gorilla, et cetera, et cetera. With each iteration of them trying to solve something, they're just making the situation worse.
That's pretty much true. Okay, one thing is we're going to have to call this interview in a little bit, this debate between us.
All right.
I honestly have taken a lot of information from what you were speaking about. I didn't know about the problem with the underplacing of items on the market. I'm thanking you for letting me know about that. I did know that they were having some issues with pricing. That was one of the key focuses that I was worried about because they're overestimating the price of hulls, and I was afraid they're going to make the markets live because I don't know if you'd agree with this, but if they go with the live market, every time buy order is filled, the market value will start to drop because buy orders are always lower than the recommended value that people are selling at. So it will just plummet everything on the market instantly. So you can give your last few words to sign off, and I'll sign off after you.
I think that no matter what side our players are on, if they're pro insurance or against the insurance. At the end of the day, we all just want a healthy game that we can play and enjoy, and we know that we're investing into that will have longevity. And anytime we start questioning the health of the game and how well they're doing, it causes a lot of concern. I think we're all players in this, and we all want what's best, but NetEase really needs to come to the table and really assess their practices, and something has to change, because this insurance program is just the issue today, but there's going to be another issue tomorrow if NetEase keeps doing what they're doing.
100% agree. So everybody, that is the interview with Tryum from the Burn Jita Discord group. I am going to link the Discord group in this video. Obviously, it's going to be under his statement and it's going to be under my statements. I hope that you all did enjoy this little interview, and I will catch you all in the next one. Now, obviously, this is a very long video. I hope that you all stayed on to the end and listened to the whole argument. As you can see, there's a very good argument against the insurance system. My argument wasn't 100% to the same caliber. Obviously, I wasn't prepared for some of the information I received. I only had the basic information. I didn't know about a lot of these errors. And hopefully this insurance system comes right in some way. Hopefully they get a balance of the two, a balance for the industrials and a balance for us PvP and PvE players. So I will catch you all in the next one. Thank you all. Have a good day.